Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And today I am welcoming my friend Teddy Nguyen. Residing in Texas, Teddy is a full-time social worker in child welfare. Almost 3 years ago, Teddy completed a financial coach master's training and began helping clients uncover the why behind their spending. This helps people stick to their budget and progress towards their money goals. Good morning, Teddy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. One quick correction. It's
Ah,
pronounced Nguyen, the last name. It's
oh,
very, yeah, it's a funny one
I
to
had a
spell.
friend in high school with her, obviously, her and her brother had the same last name. And sorry, that's how they pronounced it.
It's all it's all good.
So
But yeah, I'm
tell
doing great.
tell me about Lion Lamb Money and how you help your clients down there.
Yeah, so the whole basis behind the coaching practice is essentially an underpinning of faith-based principles for healthy money management.
Mhm.
I like to focus on this idea of financial wellness, that money integrates all these areas of our life. And if we have control over our money, we have better relationships, we have better career satisfaction, better self esteem, and all of that stuff. And for me personally, I take almost like an addiction recovery pathway of addressing money behaviors.
Wow.
So, understanding the why behind our spending, that psychology, understanding how our environment, how our history affects how we spend money, how we view and believe things about money, whether they're true or not, and really all of that person behind the money. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. So your background is obviously social work, and you mentioned
Mhm.
some of those things, using the addiction recovery model to help clients with their money. How do you see money issues play out in the community that you work with in this on the social work side?
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. Like the thing with my career in social work, I've never been in the role or capacity to be able to share really much anything personal finance, even though you you see it all the time. Like my
Wow.
role as a social worker has always been, are these kids safe? Are they getting the resources they need and all this stuff? But a lot of times our caregivers or even our coworkers, we all have money things that we're dealing with,
Right.
especially social workers, very limited mindset when it comes to all things money. Oh man,
Okay.
I'm never going to get a house. I'm never all this stuff.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's not necessarily financial literacy that they're lacking, even though they absolutely could be, but it's just, man, life is overwhelming. And the last thing we want to add as a priority is just money stress and money problems. So it's easy to push all that stuff aside until it piles up and then bites us in the butt.
Yeah, it's right. It doesn't matter what field you work in. I spoke with somebody yesterday who basically was like, I don't, people don't want to hear this, but your financial situation touches everything. How you handle your money touches everything. It touches how you're able to care for your children, or if you're able to foster, or, and so romantically speaking, we don't like to hear that. The Hollywood, I feel like the Hollywood system has given us this view of money that like love will set us free and we'll be just fine. But if you're not addressing your underlying spending problems, if you're not keeping a budget and you're wondering where your money has gone by week 2 of the month, it doesn't matter kind of how much all those nice, cute, frilly things you have. You've got to get down to brass tacks and you got to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what's really interesting, because like even between my wife and I, when you were bringing up the relationship stuff, like we grew up somewhat similarly, culturally speaking, but money belief wise, completely different. And so
Mm.
coming into our relationship, we butt heads a lot
Do
when
you
it comes.
really?
Yeah,
That's
it was
yeah.
not pretty at all.
So,
No.
do you find that, one of you is one of you is the traditional saver and one of you is the traditional spender?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So going into it, like throughout my later teen years, I was raised by my dad and he's very frugal. I'm talking like we were living like we were below the poverty line, even though he made six figures. Like
Wow.
we were a family of four living in a $600 apartment. And so we were getting thrift store clothes, shoes. we were driving cars that were like $800 or $1,000. And this is like, 2016. So it's not like 1995
Right,
where
right. Not
it
terribly long ago.
yeah. And so I grew up with, well, the bulk of my like upbringing being in that setting was just I became very critical of, oh, never buy anything new, always get a deal and all this stuff, thinking that somehow made me better with money, that I was
Mm,
like some kind of moral superiority with it. And
wow.
so I unconsciously brought a lot of that into my relationship. And that was the cause of so many fights. And yeah, I was like, you don't need to spend on that. That's $70. Like, no, you don't need to get your hair done or whatever. Like,
Right.
basically every girlfriend's nightmare. And yeah, so like we butt heads so much. And what's really ironic though is she's actually the one that got us on a budget. Like I thought I was too good for a budget, basically.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was man, I can tell you all the stories.
Ah! So now what do you guys do? Because I think it's important for people to hear that, that doesn't have to be. This reminds me of a couple that I never worked with them. I did a consultation with them.
Mhm.
Um, and just doing the consultation, I was like, oh, this is not good. And basically it was kind of what you're saying, drug out over a 20-something year marriage. And it
Yeah.
had never been stopped. It had never been addressed. It had never been, I don't want to say corrected, because I think it's more of a compromise that I'm sure you and your wife have come to.
Mhm.
But I just watched the other end of my Zoom screen like, oh man, this has been going on for 20 something years. And
Yeah.
one of the people in that relationship decided they were too good for coaching, and I never heard from him again. And I think about them. Honestly, I probably think about them like at least twice a year.
Well,
And it's been
yeah.
years since I spoke to them. And I kind of wonder, where are they now? What happened? That's a question I like to ask during consultations. What's going to happen if nothing changes? Where are you going to be in 5 years? If we hang up this call, we never talk again. What's life going to look like in 5 years if nothing changes? What's life going to look like in 10 years if nothing changes? And sometimes the answer is, I had a client I worked with who was bringing in over $200,000 a year. And she said, if nothing changes, I'm going to be bankrupt.
All right. Are we back? Okay.
Yep.
My internet was being
Oh,
funky.
oh
Cool.
no, you were good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's what did you guys do once your girlfriend, what now was she your wife at this point or still girlfriend?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, we were married. We started intentionally working on the personal finances after we got married.
Got it.
Granted, we got married pretty quickly. But yeah, we were sharing finances before we got married, and
Mm,
then we were working on the finances after we got married. So as we were like working on it, the biggest thing really, I had to unlearn all this like high control stuff with money.
mm,
And because I always thought money, and I came from an immigrant background, like my parents were immigrants. My dad had a very strong scarcity mindset where you have to hold on to every single dollar you get and make it last as long as possible, which in principle sounds great, right? But the reason why I've turned the focus of the coaching practice to focus on financial wellness is because you can spend money in areas that add value to your life, right?
yes.
Counseling, coaching, conveniences, like if you can get someone to mow your lawn instead of doing it yourself, just simple things like that. And so unlearning that prioritization of I was putting money up here and saving money over the value I'm experiencing in life because I was very much bare minimum. Like we're just bare bones. We don't need to enjoy anything. We don't need to travel. We don't need to do any of this stuff. We just need to sock away money and save. But my
Wow.
wife showed me that there's value in experiences. There's value in spending on quality things. Like now, I never thought I would be one to buy organic food, like or walk into a Whole Foods, like
Right.
simple stuff like that. I personally still don't like care anything in particular for organic food, but it's something that adds value to my wife and my daughter. And so like I'm a lot more like hands open with it.
Got it.
So,
That's yeah,
and
I
then
mean,
for her, oh, go ahead.
it's definitely something that a lot of people have to learn, um, I don't think it, sure, possibly your parents' background contributes to that, but, especially even I feel like I'm running into that more now with, like, the recent inflation and stuff like that, where people are
Mhm.
just, probably post-COVID, I would say. Coaching pre-COVID and then coaching post-COVID, I think I've seen a difference in that a lot. So I don't necessarily, in your situation, that's potentially where it came from, but that mindset is getting, I don't want to say pervasive, but it's getting. I feel like I'm seeing it more after we realized, oh, businesses can be shut down for 6 to 12 months, and
Yeah.
that side income, that full time income, that business income, people are getting a little more tight-fisted over the last few years, but possibly with good reason.
Yeah, and one of the things I realized, I don't know if I made this up or I hope it makes sense. It makes sense in my head,
Yeah.
but this idea of like a scarcity mindset, I was on that end on saving like everything is scarce, let me hold on to it. But in a lot of ways, like people who are naturally spenders, if they exist in this scarcity mindset too, it's not so much a scarcity of resources, but like scarcity of money, but a scarcity of time. Where it's like I want to use everything I have because tomorrow is not promised, right?
Right.
So it's like I'll enjoy my money now. I won't worry about it in the future. And so my wife and her family never really thought about retirement. Me and my family, we only thought about retirement.
Right.
Like it was like, coming to that compromise and understanding one, I needed to get on a budget because I actually was spending more than I realized. It was just not
Oh,
on the little things. It was big purchases here and there, like
interesting.
spontaneously large purchases, but it was never the small thousand cut, you know,
Right, death by a thousand
purchases.
cuts, yeah. I wonder
Yeah.
if you were kind of going through, and we can break you down psychologically later, Teddy, but I wonder
Yeah.
if you were kind of going through like this holding, and then kind of like the floodgates opened with like a large purchase, and then you would go
Yeah.
back to holding everything. It's kind of like a release.
Yeah. And like that actually goes into the dumb money mistake because that happened twice. Well,
Oh.
maybe three times, twice for sure with car purchases.
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
get right into that. So what's the first one you would say?
So the first one, my wife and I were sharing a car. We were newly married for like a year, a little less than a year at that point. We've been sharing a car, but then we both started working. So it was like, hey, we got to get a second car. And at the time, this was like February 2020.
Okay.
And I'm like, I want an electric car. Like, that would be so cool. And me thinking, I'm going to get a deal on this. I'm going to look for used cars. And we found a Nissan Leaf, which was $10,000. And so it
Okay, and
was
so this is
beautiful.
February of 2020, so $10,000 for used cars was a good deal back then. Really good
Yeah,
deal.
I mean, like, because usually I was used to driving $3,000 cars, so I was like, okay, this will be a little treat, but also not spending $25,000 on a
Right,
car.
right,
So I
that was the difference, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm getting a good deal on this, and it's electric, all this stuff. And so we're going to this car dealership. Never bought a car from a car dealership. Never financed a car. We didn't have the cash. We didn't have $10,000.
Oh,
So we
okay.
financed this car. Talking to the salesman, very effective salesman, I will
Oh,
say. Um, so we put down like 1,300 down, and then
okay.
our interest rate was like 13, 14%. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's a lot. That's a big chunk of our net worth at the time. And we also financed the $2,000 warranty on it, which I learned afterwards that the things they cover on the warranty don't even exist in an electric car. There's no engine,
Oh,
there's no transmission, there's no fluids, like all this stuff. So we bought this $2,000 warranty. So we financed essentially like $11,000 or $12,000. Every time that payment came out, 350. We were like, we want to pay this off. So
right.
luckily, I mean, we weren't even into anything like personal finance at the time. We just both grew up without debt, but
Okay.
so we tried to pay it off and paid it off in like 8 months or so. But interest wise, paid almost $1,000 in interest. So all in
Ooh,
all, this car costed us $13,000. and then of course a premium for like insurance. So we can say like $14,000 or $15,000. But the value of the car afterwards was like 6,500. So within a year, a used car within a year, we paid $15,000 and it was worth 6,500. So that was
Oh,
like a $8,000 loss, really. And I
wow.
was like,
Well, and what
dang.
I do want to commend you on though is you only paid 3,000 in interest.
No, in interest, it was about 1,000, but the
Okay.
$2,000 warranty wasn't like another mistake. And then there was
Gotcha.
insurance that because it was financed, we had to get higher coverage over it,
Oh, of
which we
course.
don't
Right.
usually get. So that was an additional cost
In
too.
addition,
So
right, exactly. I wonder if
yeah,
also there was a little bit of a premium for it being an electric car, if the insurance company added a little bit to that as well. But we'll
yeah,
never know because it's not like you woke up one day and had a, a brand new Nissan whatever and then a brand new Nissan Leaf. So,
yeah.
oh my gosh. All right, well, you said that was only one of two incidences?
Yeah, the other one was fairly recent too. It was like within the last year. So I'm still making dumb money mistakes. And so I had to get burned a couple of times with cars apparently. But I just like to shop cars on Facebook Marketplace. Oh, that's a good deal. Got this Toyota, got this Honda, whatever. And then I see a Toyota RAV4. It's a 2011 or something. So it was bigger than our current RAV4, which was 2005. And
Okay.
I'm like, oh, 6,500. It's got 160,000 miles. It was like a pretty decent deal. And then I go to see it. I drive it. Yeah, it's not the prettiest car. It doesn't drive like a new car or anything, but it runs. It seems strong. So actually, it was listed at like 7,500. And so I negotiated it down. I was trying to get it for 6,000. He was like 6,500 is the lowest I can do. I was like, okay. I'll get it. Here's 6,500 in cash, thinking I got a great deal. Like I didn't have to finance this car. I test drove it. This could have been a $10,000 purchase. I take it home, and then my wife's like, "Man, that's kind of an ugly car, but as long as it runs." And then her parents come, they check it out, and they look under the car, and they're like, "Teddy, come look at this." And they pulled out a towel that they stuffed in the engine to soak up the oil. And it was like it wasn't black oil, it was like new oil. So they had just filled the oil, and like that's why I didn't see any oil leak when I was driving it because there was a towel in there.
Oh
And
my
so I'm
god.
like, this has a horrible oil leak in it. Take it to the mechanic. They're like, yeah, if you want to fix this oil leak, it can cost anywhere between two and $4,000. I
Oh.
was like, oh my gosh. And
What was
so
it?
in the
Was the
condition,
oil pan was cracked or?
I don't really know. I
Okay.
think, there was a few things because we never fully got it inspected because, like, this them evaluating it would cost a couple $100, and then if it's a repair that we may not be able to do anyways kinda thing. So we were
Oh.
just like, "L we're just gonna sell it for the fair condition as is," and sold it for 3,500. So that was overnight, not even overnight, like, right after I bought it, not
Oh,
knowing, not getting a mechanic to check it out, and not even just getting my in-laws came with me to buy it. I was just starry-eyed that, "Oh, I got this deal." So,
right.
immediately $3,000 lost on this car. So, yeah, I don't have a great track record for buying cars by myself. Luckily, the 2 cars we have now are great. My Toyota Camry is like a tank, and then we actually got a newer Nissan Leaf that's got more range, and that one we got a really good deal because the previous owner intended to keep it for 20 years, but he just had
Mm,
to leave it internationally. So we probably saved about 7 or $8,000 in really great car. So
nice. Yeah.
got a couple
Well,
wins, but
we all have to make the mistakes, right? We all have to kind of work through those. And we had a coach on here. We have a lot of car stories on the show. We had a coach on here who's been coaching a lot longer than you, a little bit less time than me, and he bought a total lemon right before they had a brand new baby.
oh
And,
gosh.
like, but I think and, like, I just wanna point something out to everybody. Most of the car stories told on here are guys.
Yeah, it makes
So,
sense.
1, not every guy knows everything about cars, so we can just throw that stereotype out the window. 2, guys get emotional about purchases also. Right? I mean, it's such a perfect example. Maybe they're not getting emotional about, we had a coach on here who got emotional and overbought on a jewelry purchase after a tragic incident in her life. Uh, so maybe the item is different, but I think what you're focusing on for your clients, which is finding the why behind their spending and sticking to their budget, um, having that why and having that budget can prevent some of these. Don't you think so?
Yeah, because like one thing, especially in the world of social work and addiction recovery, our environment plays such a big role into what we're thinking about. So if you check in Facebook Marketplace for cars every day, you're gonna see a need for cars in your life. Like I almost blew our emergency fund to buy a used Tesla. Like it would have been an $18,000 purchase. And luckily I was like, it wasn't even that good of a Tesla, but still, I'm just looking at used Teslas, like
Right.
I'm dreaming for this car. And then like that dream is becoming more and more of a reality every time I look at that screen. And
Right, because
so yeah,
you're kind of feeding that addiction, really.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And like a lot of people, I mean, spending behaviors may not be characterized as an addiction. There are definitely degrees that are, and I'm definitely not a clinician to diagnose it, but a lot of it's really on the same spectrum of things, right? It's not you are addicted or you're not. It's like how addicted to this are you? And then when you understand the same principles apply to undo some of that thought process, like, oh, I get triggered to buy this thing because I got in a fight at work or I'm stressed out. It's kind of like I emotionally eat because of whatever, and spending
Right.
is no different.
Yes. I think putting everything, um, in the realm of a spectrum is a really good idea, because everybody does everything at some point in their life, right? Like everybody purchases a car. Like we'll just go with Americans. Almost every American needs to purchase a car at some point. 90%, 90, let's go 98% of the country does not have a good enough public transit system for everyone in that city to live without a car. But some people get a little excited about buying a car, and Teddy gets really excited about buying a car. So it's not that people don't get excited at all, and this is something that's wrong with Teddy. It's that he's on this side of that dial and they're on the other side of that dial. I had two family members who tried to quit smoking at the same time. One of them quit cold turkey in like 3 days. The other one struggled for years, just consist and just kept having to quit over and over and over again. So both of those family members, same time frame, same addiction, quote unquote, same habit. One stopped in 3 days and one took 10 years. It's not that there was something, and it's not that there's really something wrong with anybody. It's just that I think we need to be made aware of it. And I don't think we need a clinician's diagnosis as long as we're aware of it. I think that's the biggest part of all of our spending habits and things that we can change.
Yeah. And like I pull in a lot of my experiences with the weight loss because I've connected weight loss and like spending habits very closely because like on the psychological level they are. And when it comes to kind of like you said, you don't need to be diagnosed overweight or anything to know you need to lose weight,
Right.
right? Like everyone has emotional spending. Like that's why we buy things. Not all purchases are logical. And usually it's the emotion that drives us from I want and need this to I'm actually buying this. And so, kind of like you were saying, we all have different vices. Like I've worked with a client who spent 2,500 on eating out. Like, granted, not all that money was like for her food, but she was like buying it for her friends, buying drinks and all this stuff. Like 2,500 for food is more
Right.
than people pay for rent.
Yeah.
But like for me, cars have been that weak spot. But like I don't care much for like fancy clothes. I don't get fancy groceries. I don't understand the appeal of some of these other things that people spend on. But
Right.
ask me to if you give me $2,000 to spend on a laptop and electronics, I will find it in like 2 seconds to spend it. Right. And for my wife, any Target, TJ Maxx, Marshalls, she'll find something to
Oh
decorate the house.
yeah.
So it's really interesting that yeah, everyone has different vices when it comes to spending or even just any addictive type behavior. But yeah, like you said, exists on a spectrum, and it's good to acknowledge that because it doesn't make
Yeah.
you good or bad. It
Right.
doesn't make you like a problem or better than or anything. But it's just understanding those weak points, understanding those strong points, and if you understand how to spend money on things that add value to your life and not spend money on things that take value or that are like unfulfilling, then that $50,000 salary can be stretched so much better. I mean, you see it all the time. People make
Oh yeah.
$200,000 and feel empty in their
Oh
life.
yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely. No, that happens. That actually happens more often than the other direction, believe it or not. So,
yeah.
Teddy, thank you so much for joining me today. All of Teddy's contact information is in our show notes, and I hope you guys will tune in next week to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. Thanks again, Teddy.
Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne.